Namaste. Inside UK is a social movement dedicated to raising awareness, advocating, and campaigning for the cause that concerns and impact British Hindu and Indian community in the United Kingdom. We conduct research, studies, survey, campaigns, seminars, and advocate initiative alongside engaging with various stakeholders in society to further these causes such as raising awareness and campaigning against anti-Hindu, anti-India hate and propaganda. Today, we have Sunanda Vashisht, who is a survivor of Kashmir exodus, and in 2019 at Tom Lantis Human Rights Commission Congregate, she bravely voiced out the amount of atrocities Hindus faced during 1990 in Jammu Kashmir region. It was heart-wrenching to listen to the account of barbaric acts inflicted on local Hindus. I would like to start by congratulating you, Sunandaji, for standing up like a lioness and telling the world who chose to stay silent when our people were brutally murdered. A little about Sunandaji. She is a writer, political commentator, a columnist. She writes for several news portals and have been a columnist for Daily News and Analysis, DNA. It's an India-based newspaper published from Mumbai. Her bylines have appeared in Houston Chronicle, Denver Post, Indian Express, Economic Times, Swarajya, My Makers, and many others. Her area of focus has been conflict-ridden state of Jammu and Kashmir, and she has extensively covered all aspects of conflicts that is considered in most volatile region of South Asia. As said earlier, in 2019, she represented the Kashmiri Pandit voice and addressed the human rights situation in Kashmir at US Congress. In testimony that went viral, she was the first to talk about Kashmiri Pandits and their genocide in US Congress. She travels extensively around the world speaking about Kashmiri Pandit and their plight. Namaste and Swagatam Sunandaji.
Thank you so much, Priyanka ji. Thank you for having me over. And I have a fair inkling about what Insight UK does. So congratulations to you for this for creating, first of all, this advocacy forum and picking up the causes and issues that you do.
Dhanyavad. So, just before anything, I would like to know what was your life before the Exodus happened? And can you share your thoughts and ideas about your family, your home, the community, the surroundings? How was it there?
Okay, first of all, Priyanka ji, I would like to make a slight correction. What has happened to Kashmiri Pandits is genocide. And so there have been, as part of this continual genocide, not continuous, but continual genocide that has not ended till now. As part of this continual genocide, Kashmiri Pandit community has seen 7 exoduses or 7 ethnic cleansings in 700 years. So with the advent of Islam about 700 years ago in Kashmir, thereafter that, it has been 7 exoduses and continual genocide. And so ethnic cleansing and mass exodus has sort of been part of this continual genocide that we are facing and continue to face. So the latest that, but a bit of statistics that I would like to give your viewers is, because when you look at it this way, it sort of hits you, because when I sort of understood it this way, it hit me too. We don't, as Hindus are not very, very good about, we have a sense of history, but we sort of are also forward looking. So we don't always dwell on the past very much. And because of that, it's a good and a bad thing both. It is good to look forward to things, but it's also it also hurts us because we don't dwell on what has happened. But when I say 7 exoduses in 700 years, what I mean is that every 3rd generation of Kashmiri Pandits Hindus of Kashmir have seen an exodus. I don't know of any community in the world. I don't know of anybody, including Jews, who have faced these kind of atrocities where every third generation has seen a mass exodus. So the one that you were talking about is obviously the one that I know is 1989-90 that happened. And you asked me what was life before that. And so there are two answers to that. One is what the media projected. Before 1989-90, before it erupted, all of you probably thought of Kashmir as this place, this beautiful place with shikaras and Gulmarg and Pahalgam, and a place that is unmistakable, natural beauty, and Dal Lake. And so Hindi cinema portrayed it a certain way. There were Yash Chopra heroines dancing in Kashmir with their chiffon saris. So it just seemed like Switzerland in Asia. And there is no question the beauty of Kashmir is something that we can only dream about. It's so beautiful. But at the same time, our story was not as rosy. Our story was not as pretty. So even though the gun culture and the terrorism started in 1989-90. Before that also, and I call it a period of simmering discontent. There was the period that I saw, 80s, when I was growing up, it was a period of simmering discontent, which means that I don't think many people understand what it means to be a micro minority of 2 or 3% in a wholly Islamic society. It's very difficult for people to understand that when you are a micro minority in a completely Islamic society, you are made aware of who you are, even though we are the original aborigines of Kashmir, even though we are the original people there. But somehow over what I was telling you, over continual genocide of 700 years, the population of 100% of Kashmiri Pandits had now in 1989-90 was about 5% of the population, which was like nothing. So even as a child, even though I had a very happy middle class upbringing, and I went to private schools, I was doing very well, my family was doing very well. I led a privileged life in that sense, but I was acutely aware of my identity. I was acutely aware that we cannot, that something is amiss. There is something that you always need to remember. My teenage cousins would always be told not to get into fights. It's a very common thing. Yeah. Don't get into fights in school, come back. If you ever get into a fight, get beaten up, but don't be back, just come back. Things like that. Always the mothers would tell them. Or we were very used to, if we went to a temple, a mandir, we were so used to going to the temple and coming, and as soon as you stepped out of the temple, wiping out the tilak. In fact, I was so used to it that when I moved to Delhi and we started living in Delhi, I went to the temple, and as soon as I stepped out, it had become like Pavlovian response. I started wiping out temple, and my friend said, "Why are you doing that?" And I realized that now I'm in Delhi, I don't need to wipe my tilak. But these things became your second nature where you were, because you were just surviving. So even though nobody was killing you at that point in 80s or 90s and everything, it seemed a thing, but there was a certain amount of understanding that we are minorities, micro minorities. We don't need to get into trouble. We don't need to get into conflict with anyone. That was understood. And then another thing, there were, which I didn't see because I was young, but later I understood because I studied Kashmir as a scholar as well. So later I noticed the kind of discrimination that existed in say jobs, in schools, and in there was kind of in Kashmir before 370 there was no guarantees for minorities. Like Indian's constitution gives a lot of guarantees to or protections to minorities in India, but those, because before 370, the constitution was not fully applicable in Jammu and Kashmir. So there was no concept of minorities. So we did not, Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir did nothing to protect us. Uh, so there was a lot of institutional discrimination as well that was happening in schools, in colleges, in medical school admissions, and engineering school admissions, or in jobs, in government jobs that were happening, that my family was aware of. And it's because of that a lot of people had started moving out already for jobs and everything, because younger people, because they were not getting
Right.
there weren't opportunities for Hindus in Kashmir. But then, of course, 1989, 90 came, and that's when it blew up completely in our face. I was there when that happened, and I'm sure you'll have questions about that later.
I mean, I'm completely, the statistics which you said, 700 years, I remember reading Kashmir was formed by Rishi Kashyap, and, uh, you know, the civilization is actually, as you said, has been wiped off, the whole civilization. And, listening from you that Hindus have become minority, they're micro minority, as you mentioned. I'm literally can't live that fact that this is actually happening and nobody talks about it. So
Yeah. Not just minority, and as I also said, that there had been an exodus, or a mass exodus, or an ethnic cleansing that led to mass exodus and all that every 100 years.
every 100 years, and knowing the fact that every third generation would have seen it, it's like they have, the children, and as you say that they're, you go out, you can't fight, you just come back, people will do things to them. What kind of fear they are living into, it's beyond imagination, actually, beyond imagination, honestly. So, when you first became aware, about this prosecution happening of Hindus, and there was a fatwa released, that's the term which they use, isn't it? So, how did your family cope? And obviously, there was an emotional trauma attached to it as well, isn't it? So, what was it? Was there any help, any support, government helping, anything?
So the fatwa, in the sense, was it wasn't really a fatwa in the sense, it wasn't a decree in the sense. What you are referring to is what was announced from the mosques, the announcement that happened on the mosques on 19th January, the anniversary of which is actually coming up. So what happened on 19th, so I said it was simmering, there was simmering discontent. By September 89, September 89 is when first Kashmiri Pandit leader, Pandit Lassa, was shot. And that was the time Pandit Tikalal Chapalu, the first Kashmiri Pandit martyr who fell to jihadi bullets. That happened in September of 89. Obviously, when you're there, you don't know what is going on.
So did anything happen before that? Why it started with him?
Well, if you look at what the history tells, what the current historians will tell you, they'll tell you, the election got rigged. The 87 election got rigged, and therefore this led to terrorism, and a lot of people, they went to Pakistan and they got trained and all that. But the real thing is that while the election did get rigged, I'm not denying it didn't. There are elections that those days, a lot of elections used to get rigged in Bihar or UP or something. None of them led to armed struggle or resistance or anything like that. So what really was happening is, I think, and I have said it in my writing also, elections and all that, yes, that happened, but that was not a trigger point. The trigger point is Ziaul Haq's coming to power in Pakistan, and he started a movement where he knew that Kashmir is the unfinished task of partition, and Kashmir needs to be, what Bhutto has said was, India needs to be bled by 1,000 cuts. So this was part of that 1,000 cuts policy. They started because they had lost wars against India. So Ziaul knew at that point that there is no point fighting conventional wars. So what they started was cross-border terrorism. So around 80s, early 80s, camps or terrorist camps started coming around. POK, the POJK, the Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, that border they came, and they started young boys in 87, 88. I remember young boys started getting disappeared. I mean, started disappearing, young Muslim boys. And I've said this many times, and I've written this also, because my mother would go out and suddenly the milkman's she would ask the milkman, "Where is your son?" And he would say, "Well, he went for a training." And my mother, as naive as she was, she thought the training meant engineering training. And so she would come back and say, "You know, this person's son went for an engineering training. I'm so happy for them." And then another day she would say that, "Well, the electrician's son is also missing. He's also gone for training." And I'm like, and she was like, "I'm so happy. Everybody's going for training." None of them realized what that training was. They were going on across the border. And you have to understand what India was like in 87, 88, 89. We were at our lowest, because there's the political situation in India. We were going through coalition politics, and post Rajiv Gandhi, there was a lot of instability in the governance. So not many people really cared about what was going on in BB Singh government. Of course, the governments would come and fall within 14 months, 15 months. That was a very unstable and a very bad period. It's a miracle that India survived. In that period, that was the time when Pakistan realized that this is the best time to start an armed insurgency in Kashmir. So they started training these boys who came and who went and all that. So we knew that. And in 89, then they had already come. And by 89 September, the killing started. And they would kill, so they killed Pandit Kalaltapalu first, who was a BJP district president. Then they killed Justice Neelkant Ganju outside his court on the road. And so these targeted killings started happening. Even then, we were not sure of what was happening. We kept thinking that, these are high and famous people who are being killed for some reason. And we didn't know that it was going to come to us also. We didn't realize that. And we knew that something is wrong, but we couldn't see the whole picture. Then on January 19th, that is the day when I don't have time to elaborate this, but people who are interested can look up I've written extensively about this. But to sum it up, what happened on 19th January was, as we were sitting, it was a cold day, we were sitting in our homes, suddenly from all mosques continued together, voices started coming, and they had these slogans, which "Kafiro zalimo, Kashmir hamara chhod do," and "Yahan kya chalega, Nizami Mustafa," and all these things. And then there was this a stunning slogan that cut our hearts, and it said that Kashmiri Hindus Pandits should leave Kashmir, but only with the men, and they should leave their women behind. That one slogan sent chills in that tiny Kashmiri community. And once we heard those, and at that point, I remember hearing those slogans because I was old enough to hear them. I mean, we heard slogans blaring all night, but somehow we thought it was only in the, we didn't know where they were coming from. There were no WhatsApp, no phones, no social media. Information didn't travel like it does. In fact, there was not even any private media. There was only Doordarshan. So information, you have to understand the period that we're talking about, 89, 90. Information didn't travel the way it did. So till morning, we didn't even know what was happening. We just thought that it was coming from maybe one mosque from our thing. By morning, we discovered that all mosques together in entire valley were broadcasting this. together. And there were women, men who had come out. And before that, you have to understand what was happening, because the situation was already bad. Farooq Abdullah government had been dismissed.
Yeah.
Jagmohan had been sent, but Jagmohan had not quite made his way to Kashmir Valley on 19th January. He was still in Jammu in Raj Bhavan. And so on 19th January, there was no government in Kashmir. Everything went south. There was nobody in Kashmir to take care of. And that night, we really felt that somebody would come and kill us. And I've already written about this, that, we were in my grandfather's house, and in the Congress, it was Congress, the story that I said was that he with the two rusted with a rusted axe and two knives, kitchen knives. He came and he told my mother and I that I'll kill you first if they come in. And that was the day my childhood was lost, because I couldn't imagine why your own grandfather would say that he would kill his daughter and granddaughter. But it was only later that I understood that he knew what happens when Kafir women are left to Islamist mobs, what happens to Kafir women. So he probably knew that. And that's why he was saying that he would kill us first. But somehow they never came in. We were saved. And by morning, we realized that Kashmir is not going, we're not going to be able to live here. And with that started the ethnic cleansing, the exodus that night. And slowly, my family stayed there till September. This happened on 19th January. We still stayed there till September, till August. And by August, we had also left. And there were targeted killings. By that January 1990 to August 1990 is perhaps a time period that I will never, ever forget. My school bus was kidnapped. And thankfully, I was not in that bus, but I used to go to Army Public School, and that bus, it's a well-known fact now that that bus was kidnapped. Hit lists were released. One of my uncles was on the hit list. Another of my uncles came to meet us on February 28th, and on March 1st, he was shot dead outside his house by his own driver. So these things kept happening, and we saw it. And then in August, we picked whatever we could and we fled. So that was the story. That was what happened on 19th January. The fatwa that you say was sort of released, had been on a long time, but 19th January is when it was announced from the mosques that we could no longer live here, or the men should leave and leave their women behind.
I have no words, Sunandaji, really. Just no words. Even listening to what you have faced, what your family has faced, really no words. So, I mean, what happened after he escaped? How did you rebuild your life? And really, it was an unknown world.
Yeah, it was an unknown world. We had never lived before that. Many Kashmiri Pandits went to Jammu. Some of them went to Delhi. I mean, wherever they could. So we moved to Delhi, and we didn't know anybody there. We had no support system whatsoever. But my mother found a job, and we sort of rebuilt our lives from one room. And we just knew that that generation, my parents' generation, had it the worst, because they were taking care of the generation before them, and they were taking care of us. So they were the sandwich generation. They didn't have time to grieve also, because what were they going to, where was the time to grieve? They had to make sure that food was on the table, and children were going to school. Older people were given medical care or whatever they needed. There was it was very hard starting life from zero. We had no house. We had no. I remember we didn't. It was very hard. A lot of us didn't know how to live in hot plains. We did not know how to live in hot weather.
Yes.
So we didn't know what it is to have, I remember in summer in Delhi, everybody used to sleep in the rooftops, chat pe sote the. So we had no idea. We'd never seen all those things. We come from a very cold place. So in Jammu, a lot of people went to camps, and many older people, they died of sunstroke. And I always say that government of India has never released a white paper about how many people have died and how many people have there. There has not been a proper investigation into this, so we don't know how many people died, how many people were shot dead, and how many. But I always say that whenever you count, you have to count the number of people who died of sunstroke.
Of course.
2 or 3 years later, and who died of snake bites in the camps in Jammu, and because we really didn't know how to live. This entire community has been transported. We didn't know, but yeah, this is a very resilient community. They knew that somehow, as I said, this is our 7th Exodus, so we sort of. I'm surprised how I don't know if I could do it now. If it happened to me now, I don't know how our parents, they sort of built our lives, rebuilt our lives. I have no idea, but they did. And at the same time made sure that they inculcated in us the values that we needed to have. And
most important, yeah.
Education was so important. They made sure we went to schools. They made sure that we got education before any of us turned into activists. It was important that we got our basic education, we got our jobs, we got what we needed to survive on our 2 feet. And at that time, nobody was listening to us. You could not get any mainstream newspaper to write about us. I remember, and there has been research now, I of course was young, but if you look at all mainstream newspapers and magazines, they were talking about Kashmir, all right, because Kashmir was burning. It was a geopolitical dispute. It was a major flashpoint at that point in Asia, in world. But somehow it was always about terrorism and terrorists. It was never about what had happened to this minority. It was like we were just collateral damage in that whole thing. Nobody cared about it. We were just too insignificant.
Yeah, but if terrorism is happening, somebody
Yeah,
would
because
be.
the government, even the later governments, they were all worried about what to do about the terrorism. And even in later headlines and everything, you would read about government reaching out to terrorists, government reaching out to Hurriyat, government reaching out to separatists, government reaching out, but nobody was reaching out to Kashmiri Pandits because it was so insignificant. So
So who
most
was receiver of the terrorism? Nobody cared about them.
Right. Nobody cares about this little thing. And none of us were picking up guns. None of us were killing anybody. So we were truly irrelevant at that point. And for a long time, for about 20, 25 years, we were totally irrelevant. In India, in mainstream India, in mainland India, nobody knew what had happened to us. In fact, when we moved and we were in one rental building our people who had rented the house to us, my mother would go and tell them the story, what had happened to us, and they would say, they would think we're lying. They would say, "Kaun apna ghar chhod ke aata hai?" These people must be lying that they have left their homes, because there was no news coverage. I
There's no
remember,
coverage,
but
yes.
they couldn't believe that they're in independent India, in modern India, in 1990, somebody could lock their homes and leave and come. Who would
Yes.
do that? It has never happened. It has never happened before. It has never happened after. So they didn't know what had happened. I mean, yes, there have been riots in India. Yes, there have been things, and people have temporarily moved from one place to another. But there has been no ethnic cleansing as such, where people have been thrown out and they have never been able to relocate. That has never happened in
It
India.
had never
So
happened.
people didn't know this was going on. It was only, and I always say that internet liberated us. By the time the internet started hitting, some of us by then had come of age. So we started writing these little blogs, and this was early days of internet, so we were blogging. Remember, blogging was a big thing those days. So we started blogging whatever little we could, just to, and nobody was publishing us still, but it was just to chronicle our story. So we started doing that. There was no social media still, but we were making our blogs. If you look at those blogs today, they are still your first information reports. That's what, because people still had the memory, fresh memory, and we were writing those blogs. The generation before us, they didn't, nobody was publishing them either, but they had done their own in the basements of homes, in their own one-room apartments or something. They were also writing small journals or things. So things like Kashmir Samachar and these little journals and little things, it had very little circulation, but they are there. People were writing. Nobody was reading them, but they were writing. So when a Kashmir Files movie was released, and everybody said that, but Kashmiri Pandits never talked about it. I was like, we were talking. Nobody was listening to us. There's a difference
That's
between
true.
we never spoke. We did speak. We were speaking, but no one was hearing about us. I remember by the time I got into writing and full-time media and everything, I used to send my articles to newspapers, and it would be heavily edited. They would never allow me. Genocide to sabali nahi hai. They would allow us to write genocide. They would never allow us to write ethnic cleansing also. They wanted to write migration. They wanted to write Kashmiri Pandits migrated. And I would
Yes.
always question the word migration, because migration is always voluntary. You
Yes.
always, migratory birds, it's always voluntary. You want to migrate. We never wanted to migrate. So we shouldn't be called migrants. In fact, in government, you know, communication or orders, we are still called Kashmiri migrants, and we fight against it. That migrants are people who migrate on their own will. We did not migrate on our own will, so we should be called internally displaced or refugees or genocide victims. But yeah, so it was very late. It's only in 2014 then, when the regime change really happened in India, that some of us then started talking about it, and we started sort of mentioning what had happened to us. And that's when mainstream media got interested.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they discovered this whole thing. But for 25 years, it was a story that no one knew. No one knew it had happened.
I mean, it is a shame that we, in our history books, because I studied from India, in our history books, they do talk about Jewish and their stuff, what happened there with Hitler, what Hitler did to them. It's actually a shame nobody spoke about it. Or, I mean, as you said, that even if you were talking, nobody was listening, nobody was publishing. It should have been the
Yeah.
government will, that they should be knowing what's happening in the state. So, just thinking about it, were there more actors involved in this? Role of media, police, local government? Their involvement looks like negligible, or they were like just sitting behind and doing nothing.
Yeah, the government had collapsed. There was no government. Between 90 and 96, there was no government in Kashmir. In 96, then they had that one election and all that. But in 1990, there was no election. Government had totally collapsed. The government structure had totally collapsed. The institutions had collapsed. See, nobody wants to leave their home, Priyanka. It is very, even the birds don't want to leave their nest, even though they know they can build another nest in another tree. But if you see, they resist if you tell them to leave their nests, because it's very difficult to rebuild your home. It's very difficult to rebuild your lives. The reason we left was because the institutions had collapsed. The government is one thing, that is the executive form of the governance, but the legislature had collapsed, the judiciary had collapsed, the media had collapsed. Nobody was writing about us. And by this time, our neighbors were coming and they were saying that we can't, you must leave, because we can't protect you anymore. And so what happened was, in 90, a lot of when people say that even today, well, not everybody was a terrorist. I study terrorism now. I am a student of terrorism and I have studied it in great detail. Nowhere, in no terrorist infested place, does the entire population pick up guns. It never happens. There are very few people who pick up guns. Even in Kashmir, at the peak, there were about 500 terrorists at the most who were running around with Kalashnikovs and AK-47s. How is it that just 500 people are so successful that they can trigger an entire ethnic cleansing?
Yes.
That can only happen when there is local support. Terrorism never, ever succeeds in a place when there is no local support. So that local support I have seen through my eyes, and I call it betrayal in the backyard. And now you must have seen stories about how in the targeted killings, the neighbors were giving information to people, neighbors, and that happens to till this day. You know, what they now they've realized, and they call them OGWs, overground workers. So at that point, a lot of local population had really begun to think कि आजादी तो बस आने ही वाली है, आजादी तो बस 4 दिन दूर है, and they started collaborating with terrorists.
Yes.
So when you start collaborating with terrorists, there was no chance for us. There was absolutely no chance for us to survive. Sometimes a lot of people do, and I'm sure your viewers also will have this question, but why run away? Who runs away? Why don't you go this thing? Why didn't you, yeah, 20 people would have died, 200 people would have died, 2,000 people would have died. But you have to understand our population, and we were like 4% of 3% of the population. And if 3,000 Kashmiri Pandits had been killed, young men, and they have already been, I'm saying anything more, that would mean one boy or one man from every family, because that's how few we were.
Yes.
And that would have, and that's the story. That's what they wanted. They didn't want us to leave. They wanted to finish us off, and then there would be no story. Today, you would not be interviewing me because you wouldn't even know that we existed.
Yes.
Sometimes running away and making sure that you tell your story and making sure that you don't compromise on living. Living is sometimes ensuring that you stay alive is a form of resistance. And that is the form of resistance we showed. We stayed alive. Wherever we could, we stayed alive. It was not cowardice. It was not going away, because what were we? The government had not armed us. The other side had AK-47s and Kalashnikovs and hand grenades. We had kitchen knives. What chance did we have to fight?
Not at all.
We didn't have numbers. We didn't have army on our side. We had nothing. So if you're not given arms and weapons to fight with, and the other side has automatic guns, what are we going to do? So staying alive was our sign of resistance. That's what we did. We stayed alive. And that is how our story is known today. Otherwise, it would not be known.
We definitely wouldn't have known. And, you know, I did watch Kashmir Files. It was a total eye-opener, actually. You know, even growing up in India, I never had that much information, honestly. Never taught in the history, never talked about. So, you know, how do you think that even the world leaders wouldn't have known? That's why they stayed quiet and quiet for so long. I mean, I still think that even after 2019, when you have brought, you know, this to the limelight and to the stage of the world, has any questions done to the government or any media taken up this more proactively?
Now, of course, things have changed drastically. And the current government has taken cognizance of the fact, and every time, I remember after 370, we met, I was in that delegation that we met Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and he had come for Howdy Modi program here in Houston, where I met him along with other members of Kashmiri Pandit community. And the first thing he told us was कि आपने बहुत सहा है, हम जानते हैं आपने क्या क्या सहा है. So that was a huge thing for us, that he knew what was happening. So that confirmation that he was aware of our story meant a lot. And this government since then has been doing a lot of things that, see, this issue is not very simple to be resolved. So somewhere where the entire governance structure has failed, things have to be resolved slowly. So removal of Article 370 was a huge step,
Yes.
and that sort of paved the way for defeat of um, uh, not terror, but separatism in the minds of people. When I say that local people were coordinating, local people were doing, and it was simply because they sort of didn't think of themselves as part of India. And now, after Article 370 has been removed, and they're seeing the benign side of Indian state, and with the hope that the distance between the mainland India and Jammu and Kashmir will be bridged. A lot of good things have been put in place, and a lot of good reforms have been done. Now there is, if you notice that the entire constitution of India now, with its all progressive side, is now applicable in Jammu and Kashmir. So all that is being done. Government is doing what it can do in its own way, but it's going to take time. We have a very hostile neighbor, Pakistan. I mean, you would have seen even now the Rajouri, that sector is on fire. I mean, there are incidents every day that are happening. So Indian Army is more than capable of fighting it. And also Indian state is not that weak anymore than it was in 1890. So anybody harboring any ideas of separatism or a separate state, that's not going to happen. That's going to change. But the change is going to come very slowly. I have hope. At least now people are aware of what happened. At least now you can go to any part of India today and ask them about Kashmiri Pandits and they will know. That much, that awareness has happened. We have come that far. They know now that there is a community in Kashmir. There is a small, tiny community in Kashmir that was thrown out. So that awareness has come, and slowly things are changing in Kashmir as well. It is going to take. It is an uphill task. Things are changing, and as far as international media is concerned, that is a different story. For international global liberal media, we still don't exist. They still work on that oppressor oppressed theory, and they still cannot understand that how Hindus can be victims in India.
Yeah.
Because they think that you are in majority. Till this date, I have gone blue in my face trying to tell the global liberal media that we were not majority in Jammu and Kashmir. Please understand that, and we were persecuted, and they will just not understand that because they think of India as one big monolith, and they don't think of the little fault lines that exist. They have no understanding of what is going on. So it's very funny that for global liberal media, we are the oppressors for some reason.
Yes.
Hindus are the oppressors. I have no idea how that works, but it is a very convoluted oppressor-oppressed syndrome. And we're the ones who ran away from there. We are the ones whose numbers depleted from 100% to 2% now, and now there is 1%, not even 1% in the valley. Yet we are the oppressors. I have no idea how this works, but that's how it is. Indian media is understanding a little bit now, but that's only because of the government that is in the power that understands. But global liberal media will still not understand, and I have no hopes from them. My sense is that we have to create our own media now. We have to create our own, like this conversation that is happening. We have to bypass that media and make our stories known, because nobody's going to be interested. This media I have given up on.
It's unfair, they are saying that in a Hindu country how Hindus are being prosecuted, but if we I know this is not a parallel situation because Jewish were not targeted for 700 years, as you said in the beginning, but Jewish were the majority in that country, minority, but it will happen, it can happen to anybody. So, just towards the, as we are coming to the closure, just wanted to ask you, have you after ever visited Kashmir, your
No,
home, anytime? No?
no, I haven't had the guts to, and I haven't had the. We came in very difficult circumstances, and even as I went to Jammu this year, by the way. I did go to Jammu, and that was part of the G20 meeting that were happening. But I didn't go as far as Kashmir. Um, and the reason for that is that we all have, I think my generation, we all are dealing with a trauma. I know for sure I have PTSD. I hear noises in the back when I'm alone. I still hear those noises blaring from the mosques sometimes when I'm alone. Um, I am not sure I'll be able to handle it yet. I don't think I'm in that position. I do want to go, but when things get a little better and more of us can go, not as tourists, but as original inhabitants of that place, and as original as Kashmiris, as people who, as our home of 5,000 years. I want to go as a native. I do not want to go as a tourist. I have made up my mind that I am going to go when I will be able to go to my house. I don't want to go and live in a hotel in a posh area, and then I want to be able to go to my house without any security, without anything. I want to be able to go and uh, if and not change my appearance to sort of blend with the majority there. I want to go like I am, and I want to be able to go to my house and treat my house. That's when I'll go.
It will happen, Sunandaji. It will happen. Yeah, I have full faith. And, now that the voice has been heard, people are becoming aware, really hoping that your dream becomes everybody's dream to return to their home. Dhanyavad so much for joining us today. And I really look forward to have another session with you very soon.
Sure. We've not even covered the tip of the iceberg. There is a lot that needs to be covered, and I'll be happy to join anytime. So you have to understand, Kashmir is there is a geopolitical conflict. There is a Kashmir Pandit side to it. Then there is India, Pakistan, China conundrum in this. So it has many facets. It's not a very straightforward story. But we've just covered very little of it today.
Yes.
I do request your readers, to viewers, to not look at the headlines, go beyond the headlines and see what the story really is.
I think it is because of people like you that, and as you said, that internet has liberated us. So,
Yeah.
your voice will be heard and people will know better than just the black headlines on the whatever paid media is writing about.
Thank you so much.
Dhanyavad. So we have just heard about how the things actually happened in Kashmir from the survivor itself. The things are not as rosy as they were shown. 700 years, when we think about it, it brings tears to my eyes when I think about how the cleansing has happened, and 100% majority Hindu state had become just a micro minority. We really have to think about it, and we'll invite Sunandaji again for a further discussion on the same topic. Dhanyavad.